Mass Effect 4 is still several years away, but ever since the teaser trailer was revealed to us, I've been thinking about all the things that could possibly happen in the next chapter of this beloved sci-fi franchise. But while I've been making predictions and theories on what we could see next, I haven't actually talked about what I myself personally want to see. So in today's video, I want to explore just that. How's it going, by the way? MrHulthen here, and now I gotta say, this video has been pretty difficult to make because there are a lot of things that I want to see in the next game. But in order to not make the video too long, I've decided to boil this down to a list of 5 points. As a reminder, this is my personal list of things that I think are important for the success of the next Mass Effect. So you guys probably have your own wishes, and I'd really like to see your own lists, so remember to write that down in the comment section. Alright, let's start with something big out of the gate. The first thing that I want is for the next Mass Effect to be a sequel to the original trilogy. Most people familiar with Mass Effect should know by now that the original 3 games are solidified as some of the greatest games of all time. Most of this has to do with the characters and the story, and to say that the original trilogy had an impact on gaming storytelling is an understatement. Of course, we all know how the endings were hotly debated, but no matter what you think about the last 30 minutes of Mass Effect 3, most of us could agree on that journeying to Andromeda in order to not deal with the fallout of the endings was a pretty bad idea. And this isn't even about the technical problems we saw in Mass Effect Andromeda, but more about the fact that people were still looking for closure after Mass Effect 3. Key word here is closure. Because even if Bioware agreed to release the so-called extended cut DLC for Mass Effect 3, it still wasn't enough for a lot of people, including me. We spent so many hours, days, weeks even, with all these characters and different stories in the Milky Way, only to then realize we weren't going to see the actual aftermath of the Reaper War and what happened to our friends, and it was just too hard to accept. But it looks like Bioware have come to understand that Andromeda wasn't such a good idea, as the next Mass Effect teaser shows way too many callbacks to the original trilogy for it to be just a tease. Some of these includes the fact that we get to see Liara again. We also got a poster last year that displays a crater in the shape of a Geth, as well as Quarian and Geth bodies spread around the crater. These things alone already confirms what I had hoped for all these years, that we will see a direct continuation of the Milky Way saga. We're finally going to see what happened after the war that almost consumed an entire galaxy. And heck, we might even see some of our old friends, which, by the way, I talked about in this video. Check that out later if you haven't already. But just because we're going back to the Milky Way, it doesn't mean that nothing from Mass Effect Andromeda can be salvaged, which moves me to my second wish on this list. I'd like Bioware to keep at least some of the ideas for exploration in. Hold up now, I know what you're gonna say. Mass Effect Andromeda's exploration felt hollow and meaningless, while Mass Effect 2 was a masterpiece because of how character-driven it was. And while I agree with you to a degree, I'd like to first say that yes, Andromeda's exploration mostly felt empty because of the enormous amount of distance you had to travel with the Nomad. But most of this problem comes from the fact that this was mandatory. A lot of the time, you had to drive to points on the map in Andromeda to continue with the main missions. However, in order to instill a sense of exploration and mystery, I still think that having the ability to explore the galaxy is important in any Mass Effect game. And that's one of the things that bogged down Mass Effect 2, because there wasn't much exploration at all, but there was a scanning minigame. Ah, what a great addition that was, right? Right?
Probing Uranus.
Anyway, this time around, I'd like it to be less about driving giant meaningless distances like you did in Andromeda, and more about finding a lot of interesting and useful things on the map. You see, after playing a lot of Elden Ring this last week, it really hit me how much the developers, FromSoft, managed to fill the map with. When you're out exploring, you're either finding a really cool gear and items, fighting a difficult and unique boss, or maybe even just finding a hidden secret that just adds to the mystery of the game. And this is exactly one of those things that Andromeda was missing. It was filled with so much empty space that just didn't add anything to the overall game. It just made exploration feel like a chore and not an exciting side activity. So Bioware, please, take some inspiration from Elden Ring when it comes to the exploration. Also, make it optional. If I just want to proceed with the main missions and see the story play out, I don't want to have to drive through empty desert wastelands for 30 minutes. Alright, moving to my third thing on this list, and this is a short one. We really need a better character creation system, for crying out loud. I'll be honest here, Mass Effect has never been especially good at providing us with a great way to make our custom shepherds, or riders. Alright, sure, Mass Effect Andromeda system was a step in the wrong direction, and I could never understand Bioware's motivation of making sure that every custom rider turned into absolute monstrosities. At least in the original Mass Effect trilogy, a custom shepard could look somewhat decent, whether it be male or female. But the only real good-looking versions of Shepard has always just been the default male Shep, or the default female Shep in Mass Effect 3, and the occasional custom femshep like this one. Most of the time though, I just want to be able to create a character that either pleases the eyes or that's at least somewhat reminiscent of myself. Look, I'm no prize, but I'd rather feel immersed by looking at a person of my own likeness than this. So please, Bioware, I'd really like to see an advanced character creation system this time around. I think most fans would appreciate that at least. And speaking of graphics, let's jump over to my number 4. Use the Unreal Engine, and not the Frostbite engine. Now this may come as a surprise to you guys, but it hasn't actually been confirmed yet that Bioware will be using the Unreal Engine for Mass Effect 4. I know, the news broke a few months ago that Bioware was looking into using the Unreal Engine 5, probably because of all the improvements to user-friendliness and the fidelity of the engine itself. And Bioware did state that they were looking for people with experience in using the Unreal Engine, but they never actually said that they had decided on it yet. Part of this could be because Bioware probably has gotten used to Frostbite by now, which was an engine developed by DICE, who are mainly known for their Battlefield franchise. The creation of Mass Effect Andromeda was rough, but after going gold, Bioware probably had loads of finished assets, and by changing to Unreal, Bioware would have to basically scrap most of their Andromeda assets, which means that they will be starting from scratch, or at least partly from scratch. But here's the thing, I'd rather see Bioware start from scratch with a better engine than seeing them continue with the Frostbite engine, because as we saw with Andromeda, the amount of technical issues in that game were just astronomical. And considering that the original Mass Effect trilogy was made in the older version of Unreal, it's possible that Bioware could reuse assets that they couldn't before. Well, at least that's what I'm hoping for. Alright, time for the last thing on this list, and this is probably the most important for me. A deeper and more complex choice and consequence system. Essentially, my greatest wish for the next chapter in Mass Effect is that we could see it go back to its roots. As you may remember if you played the first Mass Effect fairly recently, the amount of choices and outcomes we get in Mass Effect 1 is pretty huge, at least in comparison to Mass Effect Andromeda. I can't for the life of me remember a single time where making a choice in Mass Effect Andromeda actually mattered, because the outcomes were always the same despite the dialogue changes. Of course, a lot of choices in the original trilogy also resulted in the same thing, but most of the time, your playthrough could completely change at a moment's notice depending on what you do. Say, when Rex flips out on Vermeer, do you talk him down or does he get shot by Ashley? If he gets shot, you won't see Rex again throughout the entire game. Stuff like this really gave the old games that emphasis on choice, because you never knew if one seemingly inconspicuous thing could lead to something huge later on. And I really want to see that aspect of Mass Effect return. Also, I can replay the game over and over again in order to explore all possible outcomes. But hey, this has been my list of 5 things I really want to see in the next Mass Effect game. As I said, there are more things that are equally as important, but hey, maybe I'll talk about it in another video. Anyways, have a great day guys. MrHulthen signing out.